Yo, what's up? It's Jeremy and I'm back. So in this video, I want to cover something which is probably the most common question that anyone that's looking to start a marketplace or even marketplaces that have already launched and are looking to scale, which is of course any marketplace business, asks themselves, and some of the questions that I receive. So that question is, how do you onboard and grow initial supply or listings on your marketplace? So you probably know I try to do a lot of these videos and not just regurgitate general information out there. I try to provide, insights using real examples of marketplaces. So of course I'm going to use Studio Time, which is the Airbnb of music studios and the largest in the world, which I started in the past about 3 years ago. I'm going to use that as an example, so that way when I talk about these different kind of tips, tactics, and insights about onboarding supply, I can actually provide some example so you can see how that actually relates to real marketplace, and hopefully it helps give you a better idea and some context around how then you could use it. All right, so as mentioned, I'm going to discuss some of the different ways that you can onboard initial supply or initial listings. So there's a few different types of marketplaces that are out there. So one's like an Airbnb for music studios, which is like Studio Time, right? So that's a marketplace for spaces. There's also product marketplaces that are out there like Goat App, like Grailed, like eBay. There's also service marketplaces, so like your Fivers and your Upworks, right? So these can apply to the other types, but I'm actually going to discuss Studio Time as the kind of example. So the first thing with onboarding initial supply that I'm going to discuss is actually just understanding your marketplace, where your ideal supply spends time, right? So your supply will be online and offline. So what I mean by that is your supply in this case could be music studios, which is what Studio Time has. So some music studios have an online presence. So they have a website, they're on Yelp, they probably have social, Instagram, they're online, right? Now others will not, and they'll be offline. So they just don't have a presence. You can't search them. You might find a search result from a mention somewhere. So they're offline. Now, something to keep in mind is when you're initially building up your supply, and this is going to be a manual process typically in the early days as a marketplace, you have time and bandwidth constraints. So what that means is you need to then understand, how do you first then qualify supply? And an easy way to do that is think, okay, it's easier for you to spend time reaching out to online businesses or studios that have an online presence because they understand the importance of being online. Now this might all sound very simple, but a lot of marketplaces spend a lot of money when it comes to advertising and sales and outreach, actually reaching out to businesses that don't even at all consider being online for one reason or another. Maybe it's a biasness based off experience, or it's just kind of like a legacy, kind of like mom and pop's business. They don't want to be online. So of course it would be very tough and probably not a good use of your time, money, or any other resources to try to convince them to join your marketplace, which is going to be online, which is what we're talking about. So that's kind of a little bit of context about online versus offline as far as supply, but I can't emphasize the importance of understanding that in the early days, so that way you know where to focus your time, efforts, and energy and resources and spending to reaching out to people. So that's the first, is just learning where the supply is. Now the next would be learning what is the best channel to reach them. So this kind of then expands on that, right? So if a music studio is online and they have a very big presence, say for instance on Yelp, right? Or they have a huge Instagram following. Well, of course they're an early adopter then. We'll use Instagram for example on this. They're an early adopter to Instagram. They've invested the time to have a profile on social. They've understood that this is beneficial to their business. And if they continually post and they continually, you can see a lot of engagement on that, well then they understand how valuable it is to their business and probably how much revenue that generates for their business. So as Studio Time in the early days, we would go for social first kind of music studios that understood that they needed to have a presence and invest on Instagram. Now, something that you can then keep in mind is, okay, we're going to build our presence. We're going to reach out to them through this channel. That's going to be our like path of least resistance, so to speak, to reach them. They'll see our Instagram account, which, shameless plug, I'll put it down here, but it's Studio Time IO is our actual handle. So when they reference that and they see us, then they connect the dots on that. And it's not just like a cold email reaching out to them. We're not picking up the phone. We're not sending out flyers trying to reach out to them. They can then see a direct kind of reference for us as a business and also to our account and how serious we take it, so they'd probably be more willing to sign up for our marketplace and convert. So I'll actually do a whole nother video talking about different kind of tactics on how you can leverage Instagram as a marketplace, not only for generating supply, but also demand later. But basically this kind of point, and I'm using Instagram to kind of reinforce my point, which is basically understand where, not only where do businesses have an online presence, and understand the importance of being online versus offline, but what is the channel or path of least resistance to reach them. Because what you're going to do is you're going to message them, let them know about who you are, what you're doing, your value prop, how you can help them as a business, and how you can convert them to being a studio on studio time in our case, or a listing and be supply side for your marketplace. So why that's so valuable is that you need to have supply and high quality differentiated supply, so that way when people come to your site, as they hear about it, then they will be something that's there, and that will be valuable for them and compelling of why they should visit your marketplace and book through your marketplace. All right, so then the next kind of, I would say, thing that is beneficial to keep in mind, or tip, when you're onboarding supply early days for your marketplace, is to craft a very compelling message. So that's, if you're going to DM a studio, for instance, or you're going to send an email to a studio, it needs to be very compelling. So it needs to be very brief, just simply explaining why you're reaching out to them, who you are, how you can help them, and just drive it to the next step, so that it's not like an open-ended email and it's not too salesy. So one of the next things to consider after you have a compelling message that you're going to reach out to the supply is to be relentless in your follow-up, right? Because most likely in the early days, no one will have heard of your marketplace. In the early days, no one heard about Studio Time. Of course, the name, they kind of like, it sounds familiar, just because the name is so clear on what, who we are and what we do. But no one really knew about us in the early days. So we did have to be relentless. It wasn't just one message. We actually had kind of like periodic drip follow-ups every 24, say for instance, 48, 72 hours, we'd follow up almost until we got a yes or no off that. So then we would kind of move on to the other supply or other studios that we would reach out to. So it was kind of like almost like an outreach process from there, whether it be through the channel of Instagram DMs, whether it be through emails, or whether it be, say for instance, even just messaging them from Facebook Messenger on their Facebook page. So that's the next thing, is to be relentless of follow-ups. So after that, so best case scenario, which is not going to be uncommon, this is actually going to happen, is you're going to be able to identify someone, reach out to them, message them, and they're going to be like, hey, sounds great, and they're actually going to sign up as a user on your marketplace, right? Now, you might be kind of banging your head because it's a day later, 2 days later, and you see that they signed up from your admin panel or whatnot, and they haven't created a listing yet. So at that point, what we did is we basically took the time to understand that they were a studio. They did see our message, reply to it, sign up as a user, but we personally wanted to make sure that we messaged the studio either through Studio Time, through the platform, or via email as like the admin and founder of the company, to make sure that they did not need any help getting, they didn't have any questions, and they didn't need any help getting set up, which of course they did. So we basically want to prompt them to then create a listing, so that way we could just make sure they knew we were here to help them do so. So typically that resulted in a reply, and then we were able to then see that they would create a listing. Now the next step kind of beyond that is we would then send them some suggestions saying, hey, here's a few tips that we recommend, so you can have an optimal listing on Studio Time, and doing this will help you generate more potential booking requests and revenue through Studio Time. So it actually works amazing. So not only do you initially identify, reach out to, and onboard a user and a listing, but the listing will then be totally optimized for your marketplace, and in this case, Studio Time. So it is a lot of manual work, and it does take a lot of time as a founder, or whether it's a solo founder of your startup, or if you're actually like a supply acquisition specialist at a larger marketplace. If you are, then you obviously know all this and you know that this works. But for everyone else, just understand that it does take some time and energy and a lot of communication, and basically kind of continually following up and just as much as you can to get what you want, which is an ideal listing and unique listing on your marketplace. So that was helping onboard and optimize listings. So the next thing to keep in mind when onboarding initial listings or supply is to actually try to provide an immediate ROI to those businesses. In our case was music studios, right? So you initially identified music studios where they are online. You sent them a message. You were relentless in it. You finally convinced them to sign up for your marketplace. But what you really, I would suggest doing is try to figure out how do you reward them or provide them some return on them doing that and investing their time in being a part of studio time, which is our example for the marketplace, right? So an easy way to do that is, and easier said than done, of course, because it takes time on your end to actually do this, but is just understand, okay, if this is from, if you say, for instance, DM'd a studio on Instagram, obviously they have a presence on Instagram, then a tactic that we actually used in the early days and we still use today on studio time is we then use their listing, the optimized listing, and the images that they have on their listing, we post it on our Instagram. So we actually have multiple accounts, and we will then tag them on all of our accounts. We will then promote them in the stories. They typically reshare the stories. So they are getting some kind of perceived return in awareness. And they know that at least on our end, we're trying our best to help market them on a platform that they understand the importance and invest in time in having a presence on, right? So it's kind of a win-win situation if you also think about it, because we should be doing this anyways. We should be posting studios to help build the awareness of studio time as a marketplace. And the easiest way marketplaces can do that, in my opinion, is by helping build the branding and awareness of their listing. So in this case, music studios on the platform that they care the most about, which, as an example, we're using Instagram. So these were a few different things, a few different ways that you can onboard supply in the early days of a marketplace. I use studio time, of course, as an example. It is, of course, manual too, so it takes some time on your end. But it's not only time, but is what it takes, but it also, one of the huge benefits, which I think is the most important, is understanding more about your supply and learning on how you can identify them better, how you can reach out to them, so the best channel to reach out to them, how you can best message and sell who you are and what you're doing, so you're refining your kind of value prop to them and that kind of like sales outreach process, and then you're creating a relationship with them, which also then helps you get what you need, which is an optimal listing on your marketplace. And you take that one step further and you provide an ROI, so a return of their time, by joining your marketplace. So hopefully you found this helpful. I think these are all different ways that you can actually apply to your marketplace. So whether it's an Airbnb style marketplace, whether it's a GoDaddy, a Grailed, or eBay style marketplace, or even if it's a marketplace for services like a Fiverr or Upwork, you can take these kind of, I would say, general kind of tips and some of these insights and apply it to your marketplace. So if you have any questions, definitely comment below on the video. I try to read all the comments and reply to them all. I actually make videos based off of some of the more common questions that people have in comments. So definitely comment below. Also hit that subscribe so I can keep making these videos. It definitely motivates me to make more, and hit the like button because we all know YouTube has an algorithm, and want more views on these and try to reach more people and help more people. So until the next video, see ya.